Drag Race Thailand Season 3 had a cacophony of issues, stemming from both production on the ground and in the final edit. From poor challenge choices to construction to execution, this season simply fell flat on its face. Compared to the previous season almost 6 years ago, this once great offshoot of Drag Race became a copy pasta of the dull rubric that we see in all of the mainline seasons. Which, by the way, barely work in the international seasons because Ru is not there to navigate the television aspect and really knows how to manage these piss-poor ideas. Drag Race Thailand was a franchise that was not afraid to make big, bold decisions in the way that it produced its show, and within its execution to the final product that we see, but was rather trepidatious this season for some reason, coming across as hollow, shallow, and soulless. Which is disappointing to see because Drag Race Thailand Season 2 raised the bar past what any other Drag Race season had done up until I think the modern era. A lot of my apathy for Season 3 is mostly personal biases against the choices made from week to week. As a non-Thailand native, I felt that my criticisms were largely unfounded, out of pocket, and lacked cultural awareness and nuance that may have been required to criticize it. That was, however, until I found several Thai commentators across the internet who echoed my sentiments. Aha, I thought. I'm not the only one in being confused why Pangina spoke almost entirely in English. I was not alone in feeling like the runway categories and challenges were off book from what would be expected previously from this once great franchise. I was so glad to know that my Western viewpoint that this season lacked cultural relevance and finesse was correct. That actual Thai people felt undercut by the mismanagement of their culture, and how much of what they expected did not actually become realized. Art's presence was severely missed this season. While I enjoy Pangina as a spectacle and as a co-host to Art, the reality is that Pangina has not had a chance to step into her own. And I think this season was a great opportunity for Pangina to display her unique flavor as a judge, but Art's presence was so clearly missing, it left a rather large hole in the judgment. Pangina was trying so hard to be what Ru is, with the high inflections and referring to contestants in a very specific cadence in the way that RuPaul would announce them. When we look at some of the other international judges like Brooke, who has her own distinct flavor and authority as a host on that season, allowing herself to be more connected with the queens, caring about them a little more than what we would see from RuPaul, showing a distinct sense of empathy towards them and their struggles and plights that they're experiencing on Drag Race. Fred, despite all of her flaws, was really good at the TV performance aspect of hosting. Supreme, one of my absolute favorites, has absolutely stamped her own distinct flavor as who she is as a Drag Race host, combining that empathy that Brooke has with a lot of that TV sensibility that Fred has, while also finding this trifecta of being a TV spectacle in the same way that RuPaul is, while also being very plugged in and engaged with the queens while performing and presenting. And Pangina never quite found her stride. I don't know what that was, if that was a wow decision or not, but it did not work for the format of this season, and unfortunately I think it sabotaged the television aspect because she just wasn't able to be present in the same way that some of these other judges are, simply because she was trying too hard to be RuPaul. I think a lot of this is a result of season 1 and 2 being produced by the Cantana group, where this season was produced by WOW Presents Plus International, and that was absolutely felt because the season was sloppy, it was unfocused and unrefined. And I think the desire to make this season more palatable towards a Western audience or towards fans of the series in general, to make it more accessible to people outside of Thailand, really hurt the overall manufacturing of this season. And you can see that something was amiss with how bad the audio quality was in those first few episodes. There were moments where Pangina was maxing out, where they were cutting audio from other contestants and judges to fill in gaps that were clearly missing somehow. There was a point during the ball where you could hear people in the background talking and having a hootenanny while one judge is trying to deliberate. And this has to be a result of the production company being switched because this never happened in the previous season. I did quite enjoy this cast quite a bit. All the way back to week 1, I was captivated by Shotgun's sense of whimsy, Frankie's bonkers brain, Swarasha's odd but comforting energy, and how inconsistent Siam's taste level was from week to week. As the season went on, I came to enjoy what little was showcased personality-wise from Benze, Godland, and Nane. Meanwhile, characters like Gigi Ferocious and Spicy Sunshine became agitators in the workroom seemingly out of nowhere towards Siam. And Spicy's Cat with 9 Lives editing never quite made sense because her drag never quite improved to the level that it needed to. And she consistently and constantly flubbed from challenge to challenge. Typically in Drag Race, the editors attempt to draw storylines across the episode so a contestant's journey makes sense and is presentable and palatable to the audience. I cite examples going all the way back to Pandora Box in season 2, who is consistently shown missing the mark in the challenges and then delivering confessionals where she's shown as hesitant and unable to be fully vulnerable. It allows us as an audience to develop sympathy for her, and her inevitable downfall paints her in a light that presents growth opportunities so we can root for her in the future. Adore Delano is consistently praised for her charisma, and her confessionals always reflect that, making us love her more and more despite her failures. So even though she doesn't win, we kind of wanted her to as an underdog player. Fierce and fabulous contestants with unshakable confidence like Naomi in season 8 are painted in a light through storytelling editing that her ferocity comes from an intense love of her family and how much they support her art, and that fuels her in the competition. I could go on and on and on, but I hope you get the picture. Throughout Drag Race Thailand Season 3, the queens are painted in such basic tones and in low saturations that we hardly get to know them because their dialogue shown is surface level. Even when they sit down for their non-food lunch with Pangina, we don't learn much about them as contestants. And I may dislike Rue as a host, but at least she knows how to make TV, how to draw out storylines to make the cast pop for television. And that's on expertise. Any confessionals we got this season were typically an eyebrow raised, slight shady comment towards another competitor, but we got very little depth as to who these performers actually were. We never quite learn why Frankie is a weirdo or why Godland is so fierce, other than she really loves Drag Race, but is that enough context? We don't ever learn why after transitioning, ZP gravitated towards Cabaret, which really isn't even discussed about her art or her transness until the finale. Instead, we get shady cutoffs, one-off confessional digs about how someone's performing badly or how they weren't funny, etc. Humans are so much more than quick, snide remarks. And yet, that's all we get. The only queen this season to get substantial depth as a creator behind the artist was Siam. And that's literally only because the entire workroom bullied her for a grand total of 45 edited minutes, which likely was even longer than what we saw. Beyond that, the queens of Drag Race Thailand Season 3 are lifeless and dull and lack personality from a television stance. Even Pandora and Mimi I'm First of All Stars Season 1 get more television editing than half of these girls did. I recently finished The Mole on Netflix, where contestant Muna talks about how much her family means to her and how winning that money would impact and change their lives for the better. We don't get anything like that from any of these contestants in Drag Race Thailand Season 3. Not one. Reiterating that this is an editing problem. Likely, the queens this season express deeper layers of their personality, of their motivations, of why they came to Drag Race Thailand, of why they even started doing drag. But for whatever reason, their personality was neutered to an almost invisible presence. This confuses the final edit for a number of reasons. Typically, when a contestant receives a competition push, the editors try to support that narrative with likability via confessionals or runway critiques. Those are aired to support that they are strong competition, maybe despite lacking a certain polish to their drag. Some great examples of this are with Crystal Versace and Bosco. The edit supports that Rue thinks Crystal was built and born to do drag. But if Crystal was eliminated the following episode, it's highly unlikely that critique would ever make the final edit because she didn't live up to those high expectations. Someone like Georges, who got the exact same critique, lasted a few more weeks from when Rue said that she was built to do drag. Bosco is someone who gets scooted towards the end of the season, even receiving the golden chocolate bar, which we all know is a production tool meant to save a favorite in case they lost a lip sync. As an exchange to remove dissonance why she got a push, Bosco's confessionals paint her in a gorgeous light. We as the audience are meant to respond positively to her because she's so charismatic and likable that We forgive her flubs in challenges and in runways. We don't care that she recycled the same outfit 4 different times, in the same way that we don't care about Jocelyn Fox's necklace being used again and again and again. She's painted to be likable. In Drag Race Thailand Season 3, Spicy Sunshine is pushed to the final episode, surviving 4 lip syncs, being called safe in the penultimate lip sync first, over a 2-time winner in the competition, and constantly beats out competitors who are doing quite well and better than she is, both in the challenges and on the runway. And it's never quite clear why Spicy was favored so heavily. Her edit paints her as being sad about sending her competitors home, while she's still happy to be there. But she doesn't come off as particularly charismatic or particularly fierce. She's not edited in a way that makes us as the audience love her. She hardly even narrates the season. That job fell on Gigi Ferocious and Godlin for most of the episode, with a little touch of Frankie here and there. Spicy's push to the finale, despite all odds, made almost no sense narratively because her only confessionals were giggling about other people's humor, being excited for roles that she got, and then feeling bad that people were going home at her doing, which does not help the edit of her getting to the end. In the previous season, Kana Warrior also received a push to the finale, having multiple bottoms, having gone home, lip sync again, expressed interest in leaving, and still made the finale. But this disappointing hollow character editing is just barely scratching the surface of this kind of rancid season. I've gone into great detail in a separate video, which you can check out after finishing this, about all the flaws and the challenges this season. So let me be brief in rediscussing them here so that when you go into that other video, you won't have already heard the same thing twice. The first 2 seasons of Drag Race Thailand were heavily saturated with photo shoots, design challenges, light acting and improvisational challenges. And additionally, the mini challenges are focused on similar themes. They harken back to series like Top Model and Project Runway, stamping Drag Race Thailand as a franchise that was doing things a little bit different. And honestly, that decision was probably for the best. I think it's what added likability to this series, and made it stand out as the first international drag race. Unfortunately, Season 3 was infested with quick drag mini challenges, and they really meant quick drag, with each of them being 15 minutes, which, quite frankly, Wanga, is not an adequate or acceptable amount of time to get in drag, especially when there were only 8 or less contestants at the time. So timing wasn't as much of an issue as it normally would be if there was a full cast of 11 to 9. And realistically, 20 to 30 minutes of production time is not that impactful, especially when these mini challenges had almost nothing to do with the main challenge and didn't add anything but blowed up the episode. After the numerous and terrible quick drag travesties, the queens were given almost no challenges that were similar to previous seasons like they prepared to do. Since it was the first international season and had well established what it was, made its mark, the expectations should have been adequately the same. When other seasons like Canada, Down Under, and España came out, those queens likely prepared for things to be similar to the UK and US because they saw that Rue was keeping things about the same, letting those international seasons be closer to a mainland season. For the Thailand queens, however, it's perfectly safe to assume, based on their energy levels, that they were expecting the challenge style of Season 1 and 2. Photo shoots, Thai culture, runway heavy episodes. With the previous seasons, including more construction challenges, the only 2 challenges that included construction elements, the ball and the makeover, both assigned terrible design materials. One being tartan for the ball, and the other being fairly cheap looking feathers for the makeover episode. And shall I add that this ball was far too early in the season for this amount of girls. You can tell on Pangina's face that she was exhausted by the sheer volume of looks by the final round. She and everyone in the room looked like they couldn't wait for it to be over. And the feathers that they gave them were intended to be added on top of the drag they already brought with them. So if they brought something that was high fashion and couture and beautiful, they had to cheapen it by adding things to it. And that is extremely disrespectful in my opinion. Episode 1 got off kind of on the right foot with the Thai tea photo shoot that I think was a great callback in reference to the earlier seasons, incorporating the photographer that was used for those first few episodes. And he was in drag, mama. But then they deviate and take a hard left towards a talent show. And while I think that talent shows are fun, I feel like they should be more incorporated into the All Stars franchise because those queens by that point have had a chance to develop their brand, develop their character for TV, and how to make that servable to the audience that are watching them. Where queens that are just coming onto the show that have an established career don't necessarily have a brand and catchphrases and merch that are already in well circulation that they can riff off of for a talent show. So we get the same 4 or 5 drag queen number 2 8-count beat songs with some sloppy lyrics that had no team or production behind it because they simply didn't have the resources for it. So most of these talent numbers were quite awkward and uncomfortable to watch. Now, did I live, laugh, love for Shotgun's very strange monkey coconut performance? Yes, but it was because I was extremely uncomfortable and cringing to attend the entire time. Siams will go down as one of the most awkward of all time, and that reaction-worthy video afterwards of Art and Pangina clapping and looking at each other, unsure if they should be clapping, was also iconic. But this was absolutely the wrong time to incorporate this challenge because these queens were simply not ready for it. All this to say, the show deviated far too hard from its source material to attempt to be a copy-paste of mainline Drag Race, even going so far as to include low-budget improv challenges for a quarter of its episodes. They were simply ill-conceived and executed and were not up to par with mainline Drag Race since that's what they were attempting to emulate. But the reality is that they never quite got there. One of the most glaring problems about the challenges this season was the inconsistency in the judgment. In multiple weeks, they did a top and bottom 6 as the normal format is. But at the midpoint of the competition, they started doing a top and bottom 5. Securing safe spots for queens who absolutely did not perform well in the challenge, namely Spicy and ZP. And if they're going to deviate from the rubric, it needs to be consistent all season. But for multiple weeks in a row, they did not follow the typical top and bottom format, essentially keeping ZP through weeks where she did not perform correctly. Even if it was a safe position in low, it still deserved critiques and to be told that it was not strong enough. This led for some audience dissonance as well as personal frustration for me because it didn't quite make sense why some contestants were receiving favoritism while others were not. Arguably, the rusical and acting challenges were the strongest in the season, but they lacked pizzazz needed to sell their greatness because of the lousy editing that surrounded them. I would be remiss to not talk about the lack of Untucked this season, and that was due to the fact that these challenges were so bloated with unnecessary mini challenge nonsense. They could have been edited down and scaled down as well as the challenges because they were quite frankly inconsequential. Again, they were just adding bloat. And the inopportunity to see these queens interact with each other, share more of their personality and more of their struggles, more of their internal monologue, I think was quite detrimental because, as I mentioned, we did not get to see much personality from them outside of a couple eyebrow raises and shady remarks. And that does not add great television quality. The final thing I want to talk about so I don't spend 30 minutes trashing this season is that Drag Race Thailand simply and honestly got colonized. There was such a distinct lack of culture and Thai influence this season beyond in the ball that it felt nothing like its predecessors, which baked so much Thai culture into multiple challenges. My mind immediately goes to the Thai Beauty episode of season 2 and the Food Lover episode. Season 3 had such a distinct lack of cultural identity and influence that it was a hollow, lifeless puppet of what it once was. It was comparable to Drag Race Holland, if I'm being honest. Season 1 specifically, which had no cultural identity that they did a complete 180 in for season 2. It terribly represented Dutch drag and artistry despite the cast being near flawless. Cultural nuance adds so much significance to the international seasons and gives them a distinct point of view outside of the tee-hee drag queens. We look at Drag Race UK, where the camp factor is through the roof, while incorporating a level of elegance that RuPaul likes to see, they're bringing something that is so different. It has a distinct flavor to it. And Drag Race Down Under being larger than life, through the roof with the camp, riffing off of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. You can see in each of these franchises, as well as in others, their culture is baked into what they do. With Drag Race Thailand Season 3, it simply avoided culture. And I think that was damaging to the brand because it loses focus. If there's no point of view to your competition, is it existing to support artists and uplift them and showcase their talents? Or is it increasing the bloat of Drag Race? I'm more inclined to believe that this is just increasing the bloat. As this season wrapped, I was ecstatic for Frankie winning the crown, and I think she absolutely deserved it since day one with that wild nose performance. But my anger for this season cannot be quelled by one really great contestant winning. This season felt so disrespectful to not only the cast, but also the judging panel. I think they had so much potential in life, but none of that was properly showcased to us as the audience. And I am positive that there were wonderful moments throughout this season that we as viewers were absolutely not cued into whatsoever. Instead, this season was relinquished to being an inexpensive knockoff of mid-series Drag Race a la season 9, 10, and 11, where it was just pumping out content and challenges for the sake of doing it, but they lacked a lot of identity. They lacked heart and emotion that was desperately needed for Drag Race Thailand Season 3, especially with it being off air for 6 years. The cast, more than anyone, deserved a season that represented them in a strong light. And I've talked to so many fans of this series that stopped at the very early points of this season because they couldn't handle the bad audio quality or the mistreatment of the cast or the terrible challenges being presented. And they never returned for another watch because they were so disappointed and couldn't sort out what they were negatively responding to. I'm frustrated as a viewer and a fan that my favorite series got so drastically changed for little to no reason. And it had little to no payoff in that change. The process of this season felt like a gigantic slap across the face to not only the contestants, but also to the fans. And production displayed such a poor level of admiration for the hard work that this cast clearly put into packages coming into this season that it was frustrating to watch. If I was cast on this season, I honestly would be furious. And I would be so mad if I had anticipated the production level of season 1 and 2 only to get what I think is only comparable to Drag Race Holland season 1, which was bad. There's literally so much more that I could talk about with this season, but I feel like this is a good landing point for all of my thoughts. What I want this to be is constructive criticism to make next season better, if another season even happens at all. Ultimately, the problems lived and died with production with this season, and I desperately hope that if there's a season 4, a new production company will be reached out to, or the production company that managed the second season would be brought back in. Because this production team was absolutely not it. What did you think about this season? Did you live, did you laugh, did you love, or did you feel like so many of us and just felt disrespected by the editing and production of this season? Thank you so much for watching, and if you're interested in my individual reviews for each episode, go check out my main channel. I have an entire playlist of all my reviews. And make sure to check out my challenge restructure video after this one that is on this page. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all on the flip.